Okay, welcome to the Women in Fishing podcast. I'm Chris Woodward. The Women in Fishing podcast is sponsored by Axo Noble Yacht Coatings, makers of Interlux and All Grip products for boats. Today, we want to talk about fishing myths, particularly for those that relate more exclusively to women. And my guest today on the podcast is Jen Ripple, and Jen is the editor-in-chief of the International Fly Fishing Lifestyle publication, Dun Magazine, DUN. She also works in public relations, contributes to Gray's Sporting Journal, and has sat on the boards of several fly fishing industry groups. Welcome, Jen.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I wish I could have read every single one of your attributes, but we might just my eyes might roll back in my head or something.
So, thank God you didn't.
Anyway, suffice it to say that Jen knows a lot about fly fishing, and she's been in the industry for quite some time. And at some point, I do want to invite her back to talk about fly fishing specifically. But today I thought we'd do something that was a little bit fun and maybe slightly adventurous and talk about fishing myths. There are an awful lot of things I think that women in particular characterize fishing as being, this, being too tough, or being only for guys, or being, it's inconvenient for women, or whatever the reasons are. They kind of block it out by saying, this might really not be my thing. But, I think most of us women who've gotten into fishing have really realized that virtually none of those myths are true. And we've been able to enjoy fishing really on our own terms. We just want to, make sure that other women understand and know that, and potentially strike out on their own and do their own thing. So first, Jen, just tell me a little bit about the breadth of your fishing experience and what types of fishing you most often do.
So I am by far and large 99.999% a fly angler. You have been with me one time when I picked up a spinning rod, but that is not what I do. I am one of those diehard fly anglers for no other reason than that's what I picked up when I started to fish, and that's all I know. Everybody attributes trout to fly fishing, and I love to fish for trout. But my friends who know me well call me the anti-trouter, because I really like to fish for fish that are going to really fight me back. And for me, saltwater is like my Achilles heel. I live in Tennessee, so I don't live around saltwater. But when I step off the plane and I smell the salty air, I get the shakes. And I'm like, where's the water? Where's the water? So if I could only fish for one type of fish, it would be saltwater fish, of course, because I think that even the smallest saltwater fish fights like the largest freshwater fish. And no offense to trouter, that's a great place. And there's nothing like fishing for a small, wild mountain stream brookie, but I like really big fish that fight. So that's where my heart lies.
Yeah, I'm with you there. Yeah, as a matter of fact, and I'll let everybody know that Jen and I were on a trip recently in Costa Rica, and she was trying to catch a rooster fish on fly, and unfortunately, they just were not working with us well. We finally ended up catching one on bait. Well, actually, it was on a topwater, as a matter of fact. That was the only fish of the day, unfortunately. So we need to go back. I think pretty much anybody who's a fly angler needs to go and catch a rooster fish in Costa Rica. That's just, that's one of the bucket list items.
Oh, yeah.
First of all, I have no evidence for this first topic in particular, but I think the number one question that most women probably have about fishing, particularly from boats, is, what do I do when I need to pee?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Well, Jen, what's your take on it? What do you know?
That's interesting, because I live in a state of dehydration. I think all female anglers do, because of this exact reason, right? Up until about 4 years ago, I had never peed outside, because I was raised very properly, and that's just not something that you didn't do. Even though I grew up on a lake, we weren't like outdoorsy, go into the wild, go camping thing. We were more the get in your RV and go camping. And so that was something that was really hard psychologically for me to get over, right? And it wasn't until until I was on a road trip with Heather Hodson from United Women on the Fly. So United Women on the Fly and Dun Magazine do a cross-country road trip, and we unite anglers, fly anglers along the way, and women fly in from all different places and meet us, and we go out. And so we happened to be in Florida, and we were on a saltwater boat, and I actually did a video on how to pee off the boat. So on camera is actually me, not like all of me, but me peeing off a boat for the first time. So since that point, I think the first time is the hardest, but yeah, it's always something, right? I mean, they make all these devices like the Shiwi that allows you to stand up and pee, and waders that zip down the front now, and all these different things, but still it's much more difficult for women than for men. And, even if you're out on the boat and you're okay with like peeing over the side and hanging your butt over the side of a boat, you still most of the time have a male captain, right? So it's still like this uncomfortable, weird thing. And then if you like are a woman on a saltwater boat, like we were in Costa Rica, right? You'd have to go down on a boat that's rocking in every which way and bang your head on there, and and then try to sit down, and then try to pull your pants up when you're in this tiny little place, and before you can come out and be proper. And there's a lot of things you got to get over when you like to fish and you're out an outdoor woman, right? And I think peeing outside is just one of them that's taken me until I was 50 years old to do, but I finally did it.
Yeah, it definitely takes a sense of adventure, and a great desire to be there. But, I think part of, and I'm with you on the, dehydration and iron kidney, but, was kind of a funny given name to me when I was fishing earlier in my life. It's like I could go out all day and never have to pee. So you just have to get to a point where you don't care, and you're just going to either, like you said, either the boat's got a beautiful transom and you can get off back there and do your thing and come back in, or you sit on the edge, or you get a bucket, which is also an alternative, which I've done a lot. And even they now sell toilet seats for buckets.
Yes.
So you can get a toilet seat for the bucket. And literally every man that I've ever fished with, and I've fished with a lot of different men, people I don't know, are very nice and kind about, just if you say, would you please turn your back? I need to go use the ladies' room. Or, it often becomes kind of a joke of, okay, where's the nearest bush? And
yeah,
and as long as you can kind of make light of it and not take it too seriously, I think there's always a solution. And to not fish because you're afraid or concerned about, not being able to relieve yourself, I just, I hope people can get over that, because it's so worth it. It's so worth it to be able to be on the water for that length of time and to have the experience. So, that would be my encouragement in terms of that. And obviously, since you were able to do it on camera, you got it down.
I don't know about that. At least I didn't fall in while I was trying to do that, right? But
Right.
I do, women, I think a lot of times we sacrifice ourselves and our own comfort and our own health, because we want to do this outdoor activity, but we're like caught in this like, well, oh, I don't want to ask to go pee, or gosh, I don't want to make anybody feel uncomfortable because I have to pee now. So, or I'm just going to consider, possibly be dehydrated because it's really hot out here. But if I drink more, then I'm going to have to pee, and I don't want to have to pee. So, there's a lot of things as women, we are, so caught up in our own heads that the majority of other people don't care about. Right. That's what I found out. Like, when I started being like, hey, I have to pee, the guys would be like, okay, we'll just take you into shore and go pee. Or do you mind hanging off the back? Or I got this bucket. They've thought about this as much as we have, men want women on the boat as well. And so, an angler is an angler is an angler, and we just got to get over it ourselves, I think. And I speak for myself when I say we.
Yeah, exactly. I'm with you there. Well, another at least partial myth that I think we need to bust is that fishing requires you to wake up before dawn. And what's been your experience with that, Jen?
Oh my goodness. Well, there have been times when I've had to wake up before dawn, but you don't really want to fish with me if I wake up way too early. And, I think a lot of times when we think about going out fishing, those of us who don't work at, if you don't work in the industry, especially, you're not set to a time schedule, right? For the most part. And so even if you're hiring a guide for the day, if you're not a morning person, it is absolutely okay to say to that guide, hey, listen, can we start an hour later? Most people, when they're going to go fishing for the day, are on vacation. A lot of people don't like to wake up really early. Maybe they've been out the night before, all that. Yes. Are there times during the day where the fishing isn't going to be as good? Of course. If you recognize that and you know it going into it and you're okay starting later, I'm pretty sure your guide is going to be like, well, okay, then, and no, you can go out anytime and go fishing.
And I'll tell you, if you are booking a guide and you talk to him a little bit about the hours, et cetera, and he's like, oh, no, we can't go, or we can't do that, then maybe that's not the right guide. Stop right there and go look elsewhere. See, because there are plenty of guides that are willing to take your situation into account. And indeed, like you said, a lot of times the bite is early. And people do have to understand that sometimes if you miss the sun up bite, the bite just before dawn, you might have missed the bite for the day. So there are some situations where the fishing is totally dependent on that break of dawn. But where I live in particular, however, my fishery is dependent on the tide, and I fish saltwater inshore. And I live in coastal Georgia, and we have really enormous tides, 6 to 9 feet twice a day. There are often times that I literally will say, okay, well, I want to launch just at the bottom of the tide so that I can start fishing on the first of the incoming. And that might be at 11 o'clock in the morning. Mm-hmm. So, it is not always the case that it's a dawn thing. It could even be a nighttime thing. I mean, there's plenty of fisheries that happen at night. And if you're much more into doing something like that, maybe you go out and charter a guy to go sword fishing, and you spend all night out there. So there are options. You can work with a guide, and obviously if you have your own boat, you can do anything you want to.
That's right.
You start anytime you want. You can have a wonderful day on the water and then hopefully catch a fish or two. And if not, if you're not too focused like that on the fishing, then so much the better. You're fine.
Yep.
Well, one thing I wanted to ask you about too, and you're, do some freshwater stuff, and I know worms are kind of a crazy gooey thing. On the saltwater side, shrimp not too bad. I mean, they can stick you, so they're a little bit of a problem. Or just a bloody chunk of bait, might be off-putting to some folks. I know that when my stepdaughter started to fish with us when she was a little girl, she was a little grossed out by it. So what do you think, Jen? Did you ever have to overcome the ooey gooey syndrome?
Well, I grew up on a lake in Wisconsin, but I didn't really fish because the ooey gooey part was what I didn't want to dig worms. I didn't want to put worms on the hook. What I say to that is fly fishing was the perfect outlet for me.
That's true. Talking to somebody who uses artificial lures about worms is probably not the most pertinent topic, but
yeah. But I do think that, even if you're a fly angler, there's something about having to touch the fish, right? And the fish is in the water, and, you're gonna take the hook out of the fish's mouth. You want to have good fish handling skills and all of that, especially if you're going to put it back in the water, especially where fresh water is concerned. And I feel like that is something to overcome. And for some of us more than others, it took me some time to learn how to, handle a fish, especially a fish that has teeth or spines. I mean, I've been pricked a number of times, but if you start small and right away that you have to give yourself a little bit of leeway to try to figure that out, go with someone maybe. Go with someone who's already an experienced angler who can, help you. And if you really don't want to touch it, then always go with someone and just be upfront and be like, listen, I don't like to handle fish. I don't like to handle bait. Could you do it for me? Knowing ahead of time to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, there are a lot of things that you can do. Like right now, if you want to fish and you don't really want to touch your fish, you get a net, right? You get a net, you get a pair of hemostats, which are like those little like scissor, like grip kind of things. And you can use that to take the hook out, you don't even have to touch the fish. The fish is in the net. A lot of different opportunities, I think now. But I do think too, even with that being said, fish can be slippery, and they can be spiny, and they can be all of that. So it does take a little bit of a learning curve to get over how to handle a fish. And even to this day, even though I'm an advanced, angler by all accounts of angling, I still feel like there are some fish where I'm like, I don't want to touch it.
Amen to that. Now, I caught a small shark off my kayak the other day, and I was like, you know what? You're just going to take that jig, and I'm giving it right to you. So I snipped the line, and not going to bother with it. And sail cats, because they have really bad spines on their pectorals. So yeah, there are some fish that you need to definitely be careful of and know to be careful of. Mm-hmm. But in terms of touching things, the one thing that when I talk to my stepdaughter about is just it's just to try it. It's just to try it. Now touch it, see what it now smell it, see what it smells like. Okay, it's gooey, all right, then don't bother with it. But I think that you can introduce your own self, if it's you that's trying to overcome this, in steps. Maybe just kind of watch at first when the next bit of bait comes out, if it's dead bait or something, just to go over there and kind of feel its texture and see what it's like. I mean, if there's a squid, for instance, if you're using squid for bait, that has a different and unique texture to it. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I like to try to think of it, in terms of it's something of a scientific adventure, Okay, well, I've never touched a squid before. What does that feel like? What does a squid mantle feel like? What does its little tentacles feel like? And you give yourself an opportunity to explore in a sort of scientific way, kind of makes it okay. And sometimes that's a good way to overcome a fear or concern about that kind of thing.
Yeah, I like that. Good advice.
So yeah, there's fish blood, and boy, if you catch a yellowfin tuna, you just have to look past the blood and think about how good that sushi's going to taste.
That's right.
And be excited about the fact that you pulled on that thing and it was huge and you got it to both. So
that's right. Exactly.
Yeah, you just caught one recently, right, Jen?
Yeah, it's the first time that I've ever experienced bloody ducks, to be real honest.
Yeah.
And it was, as a diehard fly angler who throws everything back, it was a little bit of a challenge for me, right? Because you recognize, it's kind of like the first time that I ever shot a pheasant. It's like you recognize, wait a second, this isn't catch and release. I know that everyone in the whole restaurant is going to enjoy this giant tuna, but it's still, there's just a little twinge inside every time. That's why we need to have respect for what we harvest, right?
Exactly.
But yeah, it's a learning experience. And I love that about fishing, right? Because that's such a different experience than what I'm used to. And that's what's really cool about fishing, is there's always something new, something different, a new species, and new techniques, something that you can challenge yourself with. And that was definitely challenging.
Yeah. Well, and you can release tuna too. And we did release tuna because literally our hosts at Crocodile Bay are very conservation minded, and they only wanted to take a certain number of fish. If you have a particular concern about conservation, make that known. I've been on boats before, and this was in the past, where people wanted to bring a sailfish on the boat to take a picture. And I said, look, no, I think we just leave it in the water and release it. I'm good with that. I don't need a picture. I'll take a picture of it from here. So if that's your personal bent, if you're really concerned about fisheries, then make that known if you're fishing with other people. Next topic that I had on my list is not necessarily a myth to bust, but it's somewhat of a past stereotype, I guess. What are your thoughts, Jen, on fishing babes, women who hope to entice, sell, or rack up likes based on the way they look in skimpy clothing?
Yeah, I think that's the bane of every female anglers' existence at the moment, right? Especially with social media. Social media has been so good for getting more women involved in the fishing sport where they can see themselves. But at the same time, I mean, I don't begrudge anyone who wants to fish in a swimsuit. There are times when I'm out here in my home lake of Kentucky Lake and it's 100 degrees out and I've just been swimming and I'm wearing my swimsuit and I catch a fish. And because I believe in good fish handling skills, I'm not going to like put on my long sleeve shirt and look like a fly angler in order to hold a picture of a fish, right? I don't think that there's anything wrong with people who are fishing in a swimsuit. What I have an issue with is the people who do it just for the likes, but then lie about it. Like that's not obvious to the rest of us. And I think that we need to be more authentic with who we are. And when you're authentic with who you are, then you know what, your audience is automatically going to be attracted to you because you're not doing it just for the likes. If you want to have a big Instagram following, that's what's important to you. And you want to do it by showing off, parts of you that the rest of us think we don't need to see. That's your own prerogative. The part that bothers me then is all of the manufacturers who then hire them and pay a lot of money for these anglers or fisherwomen or whatever you want to call them, fishing babes, just because they have 100,000 men on watching their profile in case they might bend over.
Yeah. In some ways, I think it is totally incongruous with what we're doing right now, what we're trying to get, message we're trying to get out. We seriously want to do this. We don't want to be just looked at because of our appearance.
Right.
And I think we're doing that across the board, not just in the fishing world. Women are trying to be taken more seriously and not objectified. And I think this just gets in the way of that. Now, obviously, hey, it's your prerogative. It's a free world, and thankfully, it's still free. But to me, it just sort of is a counterbalance to what most women seem to be wanting these days, and that is to definitely be taken more seriously, as sport participants, as people, just to be able to go out there and not have to be judged, not just on your skills, but also on your looks.
As if being judged in the fishing industry as a woman isn't enough, right?
Right. So, I just feel like we've made a lot of strides, and I kind of hope that fades a little bit, that the whole fishing babe mentality fades. I don't know that it will, but just hoping it does.
I will say that in the fly world, if you post a picture like that, the fly world is a completely 180 from that. I mean, if I would put up a picture of me with a fish in a bikini top, I would get crucified, right? And I think saltwater is a whole different world even, but the fly world is so uppity and conservative to begin with. And so, you got to look like a nun in the fly world. Whereas I think there's a bigger.
It's gone a little too far there. If you have to look like
I know. Both. We have got to find a balance. And I think that we as women who are legitimate in the industry, not that women that are fishing babes might not be legitimate, but I think that we got to find a balance. And I think that the way that we do it is by encouraging people as to what we want to see, right? And not on social media where everybody can see, but maybe in their direct messages. Or maybe there's this little unlike button. You just do that. If they really want the likes, then they can have all the likes and the view from a man's perspective, but that's not furthering the female angling community. And I think that's where that's what our goal is to get more women involved, legitimate women involved. And so I just think that every day it's a learning and growing experience. And I had someone say to me, I can't tell you how many times people have asked, what do you think about all the women who fish in the bikinis and all that? And, I used to be like, oh my God, it's so terrible. But then I got to thinking about it and I thought, if that woman, maybe she's completely illegitimate, she doesn't even know how to hold a fish, but maybe she gets one more woman involved in the sport, well, then I have to be 100% behind her, right? It doesn't mean that I have to follow her or like her photos or any of that stuff, but that also means that I don't have to say disparaging things to her online. We get enough of that.
Yeah, you're right. Absolutely. Be as positive as possible and reinforce the overall message that we want to encourage more women to fish. Anyway, well, that kind of leads me to a follow-up consideration sort of on that, and that's with regard to fishing and gear. What are your feelings on pink?
No, you want to get me started on that one. The pink it and shrink it kind of thing just like rubs me the wrong way. And maybe it's because, you started in the industry a long time ago. I started in the industry a long time ago. There wasn't gear for women. And if there was gear, it didn't fit and it wasn't technical and it wasn't decent and you were uncomfortable out there already, as if entering into a sport that was dominated by men was an easy task to begin with. And then you had to fight against wearing your dad's gear or your brother's gear or something. And I should preface it by saying I don't have any issue with women who want to wear pink. I don't care. You can absolutely wear pink. Where my issue is that when these companies just pink it and shrink it and think that women are going to buy it, that's not decent gear. Like there was this one waiter company, and I was really, really excited that they came out with like 6 pages in their catalog of women's gear. And I was like, oh my gosh, look at this. And then I looked at the first page, which was their waders, their new women's waders. And they'd been making technical waders for men for years. And when the women's came out, there was no technicality. And this is how they described it: a generous bottom and an accommodating upper. And I'm thinking, what does that mean? And then they had the second page, and I was like, what in the world? And then I looked at the second page, and it was what they were considering their attractor. They called it the fish attractor shirt. And it had 2 pearl buttons right on the front. And I thought, what are we trying to attract?
Gosh.
And so I wrote to the company and I was like, hey, this is something you might want to think about. First of all, women aren't just little pretty things that want to go to the riverside and read a book. We really want to fish. And you took all the technicality out of the waders, and the pockets on the waders are down where they would be like in your jeans. And that would be under the water for most people, most women. And your attractor shirt, like who picked that name and put the pearl buttons right in the front, like headlights? And they never responded. And I thought, you don't even, I'm your audience. I own a woman's fly fishing magazine and you don't even want to respond. I mean, so for me, it's a touchy subject. At the beginning when they weren't making any good gear for women. Now they make great gear for women, and you can find it in a lot of different colors. And so if you want to wear pink, you can, but at least the clothes fits well now, and they make it in other colors other than pink. But when a company comes to me and says, hey, we have a woman's fly rod and it's pink and nothing else has changed, I'm like, no, thank you.
Yeah. Well, obviously the whole, the breast cancer pink to me makes total sense.
Yeah.
I'm full on with that. That's awesome. But having pink connote a woman's product, just like you said, just by virtue of its color, is just basic. And in some ways it just seems so, I hate to say the word demeaning, but it kind of is.
Yes.
So I have really been glad to see that companies have gotten that message and that they've definitely started to make a wider variety of colors and are making sure that they bring the technicality into the products as well. So I think that we've mostly overcome that. I just feel like, obviously we need to continue to make sure we, get that message out. There are women that I know that I'm very good friends with that are pink people. They love pink, and that's cool. That's lovely. I'll wear pink sometimes. I definitely am not an anti-pink person, but obviously I wear a green, I wear yellow, I wear blue, I wear everything else. So pink is just a very, 1/10 of my wardrobe, I suppose. So
right.
One other question I had for you, and that is, how do you refer to yourself? Fisherman, fisherwoman, lady angler, female angler, woman angler, anglerette?
Well, when I got to thinking about this, especially flies, so do you call yourself a fly fisherman woman, a fly fisher woman? What is it? And I do an exhaustive study on the history of women in fly fishing. And to fish with an angle means to fish with a hook. And so if you fish only with the difference between a fisherman or a fisherwoman and an angler is a fisherwoman can fish with a net, a bow, a hook, you name it. But I consider myself a fly angler because I only fish with a hook. And technically, that is exactly what we're called. An angler only fishes with a hook. So I call myself a fly angler. And I like that too, because it's gender neutral, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what I tend to try to do. But literally, really, in all the stories and articles that I write, is I call people anglers, whether they're men or women. Occasionally, if I'm having to use that noun more frequently, I will go with fisherman or some other form of noun, just, in the fishing world, just to be able to change it up. I mean, like I said, if it gets too repetitive, but generally angler is the term I go for. And because I do, conventional, saltwater, freshwater, fly, everything, I'm just an angler.
That's right. Me too. I'm just an angler.
That's all I want to be is an angler.
Right. It's so much easier to say too.
It sure is. It really is. Well, are there any other topics that you'd like to talk about with regard to myths or stereotypes or things like that?
When you think about women in the fishing world, a lot of times, I mean, I just mentioned that history lesson. I started doing that because I thought women were new to the sport. But if you do an exhaustive history, I mean, women have been fishing forever. In fact, in the fly world, the first book of fly fishing was written by a woman in the 15th century. So it's not like we're new to this. So I love to say that, and I love to encourage women to go and do a little bit of history on women who have made strides in the fishing industry, because there are a lot of us, and that gives me the ability to tell other women that you have a foundation. You belong on the boat, you belong in the tackle shop, you belong in the fly shop, you belong in the rivers. This is your sport also. And I think that one of the myths that has been perpetuated is that women are new to the sport. And I think, and I know that's not the truth either.
Absolutely. That's great. A great perspective to bring up. And a while back when I first started doing more articles on women fishing, I did a piece on 3 generations of women in fishing, particular saltwater fishing, and just going back to, say, the 40s and 50s and the women that were involved there, and the women in, for instance, and we've mentioned IWFA, International Women's Fishing Association, several times in this podcast. And one of the main reasons that it was started was because the women who were the spouses of the men who were fishing tournaments said, hey, we want to fish too. And so they formed their own association and they started fishing tournaments. I was like, yeah, that was 1952 or something. So, I mean, we've always been feeling this way. We've always been wanting to participate and find ways to do that. I think knowing that you're certainly not alone and you're certainly not the first, and you don't have to blaze a trail is a very important perspective to have. So thanks for that.
Thank you for blazing the trail as well.
Well, I'm a latecomer, only started fishing in the 60s. So, hey.
Oh, you slacker.
Really. All right. Well, I'm going to come up and fish with you in the stream sometime. So
I love that.
Yeah. So hopefully I'll be knocking on your door at some point. And I appreciate you coming and sitting down and talking with me about this stuff. Hopefully we've entertained and thrown some ideas out there that might help make others feel more comfortable when they're considering going fishing. So do you have an upcoming trip or that we can sign off on?
Yeah, I'm gonna go fish in Bristol, Tennessee on the South Holston in September. So I'm looking forward to that.
That sounds awesome. What are your targets going to be?
Big brown trout.
Oh,
when I said that I didn't like trout, well, I like big brown trout.
big brown trout. That's an exception. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to try to stay off the water this weekend. Is Labor Day weekend that we're recording this. And so I'm going to maybe stay off the water, but maybe go fishing on Tuesday. So, and I will be targeting hopefully redfish and trout primarily.
Wow. That sounds fun.
And we'll compare catches later. So, well, thanks again for joining me, Jen, and everybody. Get out on the water and enjoy yourself.